Picture this. A Nazi officer in 1937 writing a panicked letter to Berlin, begging his superiors to intervene, because what he's witnessing is too horrific even for the Third Reich. What could possibly be so brutal that it would shock a Nazi? The answer lies in one of history's most buried secrets. While the world remembers Hitler's name and face, most people have never heard of Hideki Tojo or Emperor Hirohito. Yet Japan's war machine in World War II killed up to 30 million people, most of them civilians. They conducted medical experiments that would make Dr. Mengele sick. They industrialized sexual slavery on a scale that defies imagination. And somehow, they escaped the reckoning that Germany faced. The Japanese emperor who presided over all of this, he ended up visiting Disneyland in 1975, smiling and waving while riding the teacups. Can you imagine Hitler's right-hand man doing the same? This is the story of how an entire nation's war crimes vanish from global memory. Let's travel back to 1937, to China's capital city of Nanking. Japanese troops didn't just invade, they unleashed 6 weeks of sadism so extreme that witnesses struggled to find words. Soldiers held public beheading contests to see who could kill the fastest. They raped women in front of their families, then carved them open with bayonets. Pregnant mothers were gutted alive. Babies were thrown in the air and caught on sword points like some twisted game. One witness described a 9-year-old girl raped by more than 20 men in a single night, then impaled with a bamboo spear. Between 200,000 and 300,000 people were slaughtered. It was so horrific that Nazi officials stationed in the city wrote desperate reports back to Berlin, begging anyone, to make it stop. But Nanking wasn't even the worst of it. In northeast China, Japan operated a secret facility called Unit 731. Inside this house of horrors, Japanese scientists dissected living prisoners without anesthesia, removing organs one by one to see how long a human body could survive. They conducted frostbite experiments on 3-day-old infants. They tied prisoners to stakes and dropped plague bombs filled with infected fleas overhead, and studied how the disease spread. People's arms were frozen solid and shattered with hammers like ice sculptures. Some were used as live targets to test flamethrowers and grenades. The plague bombs developed here killed hundreds of thousands of Chinese civilians. American, Russian, and Korean prisoners were also used as test subjects. Virtually none survived. Meanwhile, the Japanese military turned sexual violence into an industrial operation. Around 200,000 women, mostly Korean and Chinese, were kidnapped or tricked into becoming comfort women. They were raped dozens of times a day, beaten and worse. There's evidence of teenagers with shattered pelvises, girls who died from infection, suicide, or simple exhaustion. One survivor described being forced to service 40 men in 24 hours. If you were a soldier captured by the Japanese, your fate wasn't much better. On the Bataan Death March in 1942, Japanese guards bayoneted anyone who stumbled. Thousands died on the road. Those who survived faced starvation, disease, and slave labor in prison camps. Here's some perspective that will shock you. The death rate for Allied prisoners under Nazi control was about 4%. Under Japanese control, 30%. For Chinese soldiers, there were no prison camps at all, because most were executed on the spot. Take the story of Louis Zamperini, the Olympic runner whose plane was shot down over the Pacific. He spent 47 days at sea before Japanese forces picked him up and threw him into a camp known as Execution Island. A sadistic commander named Watanabe made it his personal mission to break Zamperini. He beat him daily, sometimes punching him unconscious. He starved and humiliated him. One day, he ordered every man in the camp to punch Zamperini in the face over 200 times. Behind all this brutality was a culture that worshipped death over surrender. In the Pacific, Less than 1% of Japanese troops allowed themselves to be captured. They fought to the death or took their own lives. That belief was so deep that on islands like Saipan, entire civilian families, including mothers holding their children, jumped off cliffs rather than face capture. So what happened after the war? Germany got never again. Top Nazi leaders were dragged into court, paraded before the world, and hanged. Swastikas are still banned in Germany today. The country spent decades apologizing, educating, and confronting its past. You can't walk through Berlin without stumbling into a memorial. But Japan got a clean slate. They did hold some war trials and executed 7 people, including Tojo. But by 1958, every other convicted war criminal was set free. The worst offenders were never even tried. Remember Watanabe, the commander who tortured Zamperini? He was number 23 on General MacArthur's most wanted list. His crimes were public knowledge, but he hid out for a few years, then re-emerged as a free man working in insurance. He died at 85 without ever seeing punishment. Unit 731's leadership was never prosecuted. In 1946, US intelligence struck a secret deal, giving the scientists full immunity in exchange for their germ warfare research. The data was classified and used as foundation for America's own bioweapons program. Emperor Hirohito, who presided over everything, got a complete pass. MacArthur worried that arresting him would require 1 million troops to keep Japan stable, and that the Soviets might fill any power vacuum. Why did this happen? 3 key reasons transformed Japan from brutal empire to sympathetic victim. First, the story was never properly told. After World War II, for Americans, the main characters were in Europe. The Allies made filming Nazi atrocities a top priority, shooting hours of footage at concentration camps. But Pacific theater footage was rare, mostly showing general aftermath rather than actual atrocities. Asian victims didn't resonate the same way with Western audiences. Second came nuclear sympathy. The atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki didn't just end the war. They rewrote its story. Images of charred school children and vaporized bodies were unforgettable. The country that butchered its way through Asia became seen as the first victim of nuclear warfare. Japan leaned into this hard, building a national identity around peace and atomic suffering. Every August, Hiroshima hosts solemn ceremonies treated as uniquely tragic events, overshadowing what Japan did before 1945. Third were Cold War realities. By 1947, American priorities had flipped. Communism was spreading, and Washington decided Japan was more useful as a stable ally than a punished enemy. They protected the emperor, fast-tracked economic recovery, and stopped prosecuting war criminals. Purged war criminals quietly returned to power. Men who'd overseen slave labor and war campaigns now ran ministries and banks. The result? Within decades, the world saw Japan as the land of Toyotas and Walkmans. A 2023 poll found that only 4% of Japanese people under 30 had correct estimates of the Nanking death toll. America helped build a sanitized version of Japan's wartime history, one that was easy to work with and live with. This isn't about keeping a scoreboard of evil. It's about remembering millions of people who deserve to be remembered. History shows us that who tells the story often determines what we remember and what we forget. The next time someone asks why we never forget the Holocaust, but rarely discuss Japanese war crimes, you'll know the answer. If this opened your eyes to hidden history, smash that like button and subscribe for more shocking stories the world forgot. What other buried secrets should we uncover next?